been out in the world doing water conservation for the last couple decades, and they know the difference between a real-world solution and an armchair solution. And we're going to be discussing solutions that work and ones that failed. I think anybody that's done things in the field knows that technology alone isn't the answer. It's as much process and how you word things and how you engage people to get them interested and committed to following through. So obviously there are a lot of components to the drought that have been a long time coming, but the recent executive order on April 1st has brought the crisis to the top of the news churn, and for, we hope, at least a little while there's time to make action a hot topic. And I think one theme that many of our speakers and our students will agree with is how fundamentally ignored water waste has been, and I specifically calling out water waste. I think we've driven down the street many times and seen sprinklers going full force in a rainstorm. We've seen leaks all over the place. The problem's been with its low cost, easy availability, and apparent abundance. Water waste has just been historically an ignored issue. But with images like this one, even the most jaded water user can no longer ignore the reality. We can no longer afford to waste water. And I would suggest that we're entering a radically new era, an era where the expression of as cheap as water is becoming quickly a thing of the past, and we're looking the other way, regardless of where it is. It is no longer acceptable from any perspective. So how do we address the new crisis that has been so many decades in the making, and what has worked best, and what can we all do? And for that, we are honored to have our first guest, Tim Barr. A little background on Tim. Tim serves as the retail and wholesale customers of Western Municipal Water District as the District Deputy Director of Water Resources. Western supplies supplemental imported water to a total residential population of more than 800,000 individual water users in western Riverside County. Mr. Barr is responsible for development and delivery of water efficiency and conservation programs for the agricultural, commercial, and residential water users throughout Western's general service area. Tim has worked at Western twice in his 23-year career in water, with a brief stint at one of Western's wholesale customers, Rancho Water District. He was awarded the California Urban Water Conservation Council's Excellence Award in 2009 and was recently elected to the Council Board of Directors. And Tim looks forward to a day in the not-too-distant future where the life-giving value of water and the value of water service is appreciated by customers and not taken for granted. And for full disclosure, I've worked with Tim on several water conservation programs, and I'm always amazed not just by his passion for water conservation, but his intelligence and measured approach to solving problems, which is, I think, a constant theme of doing water conservation no matter what you're trying to do. So, Tim, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction. I'm honored to be here.
Great. So, Tim, we've got a couple questions, and what I thought we'd do is we'll go through those, and as the questions come out, maybe just bounce around some of the associated topics that seem to come up, and we don't have to stay on topic necessarily, but we'll use these questions as a framework. And I know a lot's been happening, so even when we made these questions up in the last 2 days, some new pronouncements have come out. So why don't we start out with the first piece and catch up with what's recently occurred. What does last week's proclamation mean to a water agency like Western Municipal Water District, and what was the most recent announcement that's got everybody scrambling?
So clearly your introductory slides explained it well. As a state, we are supply challenged. Precipitation year to date is well below average. The 2 prior years were below average. Snowpack, as the governor announced last week, from where there should be snow, is non-existent. Western does support what the governor is doing, does support the request for mandatory reductions. However, the state board has proposed a draft framework that is not equitable across the state. It does require some agencies to subsidize others with higher than 25% reductions. That's a little bit onerous, a little bit scary for agencies. Western would be one of 135 agencies, typically inland agencies, typically agencies with smaller populations in arid climates. We would be subsidizing population centers by having to reduce more than what the governor asked for. We're being requested to reduce by 35% in our area. The state board has a flawed methodology. We're working to fix that. We're working with the state board to fix that. We hope to work with them. They have used a value called gallons per capita daily, and a variant of that, residential gallons per capita daily, to determine which agencies should have to reduce a certain amount. They used a single snapshot in time, September 2014, to justify that segregation of agencies. Agencies with cooler climates have to reduce less, something like 10% to 20%. A few agencies are at the 25% target, and there's 135 agencies that have to reduce greater than what the governor requested. So clearly the methodology is flawed. Can you move to the next slide? So for an agency, it means we have to carefully look at our planning efforts. We have to carefully look at water rates. For all Californians, what this means directly from the state board, it means that actions that you see every day, water waste, the fixed sprinkler that results in a geyser, overspray and runoff, will become very, very expensive. Agencies are going to be forced to implement fines and or penalties to curb this water waste. That's going to be the first thing we go after. But frankly, a mandatory 35% reduction means to Western and many agencies that we're going to start implementing our shortage contingency plans. We're going to look at things like reducing landscape water demand, both in single family and commercial, to the point where turf is not viable, to the point where those folks that have participated in programs to replace turf with climate-appropriate landscaping recently will have trouble keeping that landscape alive in its early year, because those landscapes aren't mature yet. It's going to be tough. We're hoping to work with the state board to fix what we perceive as a wrong. Can we look at the next slide? So here's our biggest fear, and this is the biggest fear of many agencies, not just those in our category having to do a 35% reduction. What this slide shows is that using the state board's math, we have reduced demand by about 30% from where we were in the early 2000s. We've dropped it about 29 to 31%. If you look at the most recent 5 years, we've leveled off. We've curbed our inefficient water use, and our customers' behaviors have changed. Their appreciation for water budgets have changed. What the state board is asking us to do is take a look at the 2013 number and reduce 35% from there. That is going to be devastating to the economy.
And I assume, too, that you probably have had population growth during that period of time to some degree as well, correct?
We had population growth in the early 2000s. With the economic recession in 2007, 8, 9, and some people would say in the Inland Empire here, we're still recovering. We have not had very much growth at all.
I see. Yeah, we were talking earlier, and I think it was just so interesting. From our perspective, the best sentence would have been a 50 or 95% reduction in waste. Because it seems to me, based on what the governor is suggesting, that if you procrastinated and do nothing for the last 10 years, you're in a better position than if you were proactive and have been saving water the last 5-10 years.
Well, that's what the measures that we've implemented. In 2008, we passed a water use efficiency master plan. Board approved a master plan. We implemented a large portfolio of efficiency programs, which I will get to later in future slides. We implemented a new rate structure with budgets. I'll also get to that later on in this presentation. And you can see that it's paid off. We implemented all of that stuff in late 2008, had a lot of programs in place for focus on the landscape and commercial water use, and it's paid off.
Interesting. So what I think a lot of people are wondering too, what does your supply look like for your agency in Southern California at large? I mean, obviously we've got reservoirs that are extraordinarily depleted at their lowest levels ever in some cases. We get water that we import as well. Is it possible for a different approach where we say we're going to eliminate 95% of the waste, and rather than just take this broad-based hatchet approach and say everybody has to save 35 or 25% regardless of what their waste percentage is? Is there enough water to survive based on that approach, or do we have to go to this draconian step at this point?
So why don't you step to the next slide and let me explain where we get our water.
Perfect.
Western Municipal Water District is a member agency of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. And the slide here shows two specific, what I'll call straws. Southern California receives roughly 50% of its normal year demand from the Colorado River Aqueduct and the State Water Project. Why don't you go to the next slide? This shows all the member agencies of Metropolitan Water District. Western is the green segment on the right side of the slide there. So we are inland. All of these agencies also have local supplies, recycled water. Some have groundwater desalinization. Some have ocean water desal, just general groundwater. But we rely on about 50% of our total supplies in a normal year from outside. In a non-normal year, a low supply year, we clearly don't have supply coming from the State Water Project. Last year it was at a 5% allocation. Currently it's at a 20% allocation. So we have to do more with less. So we've invested in more local projects, more groundwater desalinization, that is the cleaning up of brackish groundwater, taking the high salt content out and purifying it to meet state and federal drinking water standards. What's interesting about what the state board is going to do to us if they were to mandate this 35 or even 25% reduction is that our customers have invested in reliability. They have paid millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to increase the supply reliability in our region. So we have grown recycled water systems. We have expanded our desal capabilities. And what the state is asking us to do is say, it doesn't matter where your water comes from. What they're saying is reduce all water use by 35%, all potable water use by 35%. So that means that these projects that we built and paid for to increase our reliability in dry times have to be reduced. They have to come offline. So they become stranded assets. It makes no sense whatsoever. What I agree with is that we should be targeting water waste. We should be targeting runoff. We should be targeting excessive irrigation. We should be targeting those things, and I think we would be in a much better picture both in Southern California and statewide.
I know the Pacific Institute did a study, gosh, I don't want to say 2 years ago, but it seems like everything goes so fast. What I think is 2 years ago is 5 years ago, but that suggested that there's enough water in California, even in drought situations, in times of drought, as long as we eliminate the waste. And of course, they took some heat for who they targeted in regards to the agricultural community as far as crops being grown, but they also pointed out a lot of areas that you're mentioning in the urban water use piece. And I think that's probably the big question is, what does that waste represent, and can we get from here to there by just targeting the waste? It does seem silly to target the entire water use category without first going after the waste and then seeing where you're at. But
agreed.
How prevalent is waste, do you think? There
are things we can do. Southern California is currently in a behavioral change, a metamorphosis of sorts. We're really taking a look at where we have planted turf grass. Now, there is no substitute for turf grass in a playground, in a park, on a soccer field, on a baseball field. in your backyard where you need spillway space off your back patio. But in the front yard, where the only person who is enjoying it is your gardener, once a week when he or she comes to mow the lawn, or let's call it harvest the crop, you really have to think about the decision that was made to put it in a front yard. And it's the highest water use plant, and in an arid climate such as Riverside, where we are, it should be reserved for functional areas. And we should rethink what's in our front yards, what's in our city medians. I don't recall seeing people barbecuing in a city median or sunbathing in a city median, yet there's a lot of grass in those city medians.
I completely agree. We replaced our front yard with natives, and it's easier to upkeep and simpler to, it looks great and easier to water. It makes a lot of sense. And we've got turf in our backyard so our kids can play and not get hit by natives. So,
that's exactly where it belongs, is places where it's going to be used.
So maybe you could give some examples of how you guys have attacked waste, because I know you guys have been way ahead of the curve and are really seen as a leader in conservation. What's worked, and even I think if you could give a little color about, what has helped make it work. I know sometimes people just think, for instance, low-flow toilets are a magic bullet, but there's still some upkeep and maintenance to even low-flow toilets as far as flapper valves failing, and there's always sort of backstory to every solution that is the trick to making it successful.
Sure. So let's step to the next slide. And you have to start with the supply and what we're doing to stay ahead of the curve. You have to invest in reliability. We have to do things differently. But just because you have a supply doesn't mean you waste it. So let's go to the next slide. Wherever your supply comes from, you have to do smart things. So what we have is we have an efficiency portfolio. We provide free evaluations for all of our customers. We will go out to a commercial customer and look at how they use water indoors to serve food, to produce produce, to irrigate their landscape outside. We will go to residential customers and help them as well. We are firm believers in smart irrigation technology. It starts with a controller that is capable of adjusting a schedule, starting with a smart schedule and adjusting that schedule, because we have so many people who don't spend the time every day to adjust their irrigation schedule. I don't. That's why I have a smart irrigation controller. I want it to adjust automatically based on the climate conditions, based on rainfall, those kinds of things. We're big believers in that. We provide free irrigation technology to our commercial landscape customers. They just have to install it correctly. We did a Smart Yard on-bill financing program where, in partnership with HydroPoint, we provided irrigation controllers installed to single-family residential customers, and they're paying for it on their water bill. We have on-bill financing of small irrigation repairs or leaks. There's a number of folks in the community who they just can't afford right now to go out and fix that leak in their front yard. So they can get the contractor out there, get it repaired, get the bill, pay the contractor. We will put that on their water bill, and they'll pay it off over 24 months as opposed to paying for it immediately. We provide free high-efficiency nozzles through a web program called freesprinklernozzles.com. We, like a lot of Southern California agencies, provide turf replacement incentives. We have not abandoned the indoor water sector, however. Although 65% of the water that we deliver to our sector is used outdoors, there's still opportunity inside in commercial entities. We provide the direct installation of high-efficiency urinal flush valves for schools, for commercial entities, for sports parks, those kinds of things. In the multifamily dwellings, apartments and condos and mobile home parks, we still provide high-efficiency toilets installed free of charge. We have pay-for-performance programs where if there isn't something we've thought of and a commercial customer comes to us and says, hey, I've got this great idea, all it has to do is pencil out. If we think it's going to show savings, we'll pay for 50% of that project cost up front, and then the balance of that project cost after the measured savings have been shown. We're interested in efficiencies wherever efficiencies lie.
It's an incredible list. what's been the biggest challenges that you've seen? I know it's hard to generalize across all those different programs, but I know for Smart Yard, one of the big challenges was just what kind of words we use to make sure people engage the program correctly. Is there a shared challenge or obstacle that all these different initiatives have, or is it different per, or what sort of lessons have you learned from those processes?
Well, I think the most important lesson that we learned is customers want to do their part for the community. They want to be part of a larger community. They just, in many cases, don't know how. They don't know what their level of efficiency is. They believe they're doing everything right, but they don't know whether they're inefficient or not, or inefficient, efficient or inefficient. So we undertook a project. In the Smart Yard thing, we interviewed people, we set budgets for them, and helped them understand whether there was a potential for increased efficiency and a quick return on their investment. Since that time, we have implemented water budgets for all of our customers. So now they know. They get a signal every single month on their water bill, and it tells them whether they're in budget, over budget, and we provide them those free programs to help them stay within budget. It's all about communication, and we provide that signal every single month on the water bill.
It's really creating a feedback loop as far as rewarding good behavior and helping people understand what's the drift or cause behind bad behavior.
That's right, and a lot of folks will get into this conversation about, yeah, you want me to reduce my water, but then rates go up. What we've done is something very different. We have figured out a way to maintain revenue stability for the water agency, and you can probably go to the next slide here, by building a structure that if every single customer is in budget, we have the revenue we need to run the district. For those customers that are over budget, we can target them and reduce their inefficient water use, and we still have the revenue required to run the district, to make sure that water quality meets drinking water standards, to make sure that fire hydrants are working correctly, to make sure that meters are being read, to make sure that pipe leaks are being fixed. All those kinds of things. We have that revenue stability, and we can reduce the wasted water. It works well for the customer, it works well for the agency, and it works well for the efficiency of water use.
So if I understand correctly, you've basically calculated what your basic operating costs are, what those costs need to be supported, and then built that into the base rate, and then anything that's waste on top of that gets tiered rate, and you utilize the tiered funds for what? Other conservation programs to attack that waste area? Yeah,
that's exactly what we've done is in the what we call penalty tiers, inefficient, wasteful, or unsustainable water use, there's 3 penalty tiers above budget. There is a conservation program penalty in there, and all of that money goes back to efficiency programs. It pays for all of those free things we just talked about. It pays for free sprinkler nozzles. It pays for free irrigation controllers. It pays for the free installation of high-efficiency toilets in multifamily dwellings. It does that for us.
That's huge, because now you're not conflicted to save water.
That's right. I keep telling everybody that if everybody was efficient, I'd work myself out of a job.
That's interesting. It's funny, I was talking to USA Today yesterday, and trying to make it catchy or whatever, go to a little bit of an extreme, but I said, to me, the solution to this problem is a 4-letter word, and it's data. And so if I can see what's happening at the last, mile of the water network, I see leaks, I get information. The quicker I get the information, the quicker I can react, and the more I can eliminate waste. And it's perhaps one of the silver linings to this crisis is we can incent and motivate the government and people to invest in visibility systems like flow sensors and real-time water networks. It'll be one sort of good output from this crisis. So we sort of talked about this a little bit, but just to reemphasize for folks that might not be on Square, we were talking about you've got your base operating costs and your budget-based tiered rates. You've got the tiered rates. How do you guys figure out when I'm a household, I go over my base rate and now I'm into tier? I mean, how are you calculating what is a fair water budget for me to be operating under versus something that is egregious?
Okay, so there's two things to add here. There is a difference between a tiered rate structure and a budget-based or allocation-based rate structure. What I've shown on the screen here is just a block rate structure, just tiers. Each tier is the same for all customers. For example, water use under 7,500 gallons, I'm just being very simplistic here. Water use under 7,500 gallons may be priced at $1 per 750 gallons. That's about a billing unit. Water in a second tier, something above the 7,500 gallons to 5,000 gallons, might be priced at the next level. If your water use is only in Tier 1, regardless of whether you're a residential customer with only indoor water use or a large landscape customer, your pricing is the same. Clearly, if I have a large yard or I'm a large landscape account, I'm going to have water use that is in the upper tiers. This is not a measure of efficiency, it's just a tiered structure. Why don't we go to the next slide? So in the case of a single family budget, we use the number of people in the household, give every single person 60 gallons of water per day for every single day in the billing system, billing period, and that is considered the indoor budget. The outdoor budget is a measure of the irrigated area times a climate factor, in this case, evapotranspiration rate. We put all these together, and let's go to the next slide. And combined, Tier 1 would be the indoor budget, and Tier 2 would be the outdoor budget. Combined is 100% of the water needed by this example single-family sector. If customers use water within their budget, they pay the lowest possible rates. They pay only in Tiers 1 and 2. If they exceed their budget, and this is true for all customers, not just single family, if a landscape customer exceeds their budget by 13%, let's say, then that would put them in the next tier, and they would pay a higher rate. If any customer exceeds their budget, their defined budget, by something between 126 and 150, they pay the next tier, and for the unsustainable water users, they would pay the highest tier. So there's an incentive, there's a financial incentive to drive water use back to in budget. So that's the difference between a tier and a budget tier.
So you're really attacking the waste area. You're saying if you waste, it's going to cost you significantly more money than if you're at what we call efficient use. But
that's right.
Where do you get the data as far as number of people in the household and the size of the landscape, and how do you get those main driver numbers?
So census values are the start. We start with 3 persons per household in single family and 2 persons per household in multifamily. We have an adjustment process where any customer at any time can send in or go online and fill out an adjustment form and change the number of people in their household. The landscape starts with aerial imagery, a digital measurement of aerial imagery. Sometimes there's accuracy issues with slopes and whatnot, so we provide free measurement for any customer, and we'll put boots on the ground and actually make sure that the aerial imagery accurately reflects what's on the ground. So it's a measurement and an adjustment process.
It's amazing, and so you guys are really turning into an IT business. I mean, water agencies are really repositories for huge amounts of data now that's being applied on a per-site level to understand what the budget tier should be.
The only way to define a budget is to know how water is being used on that site. So we have to start engaging with our customers, and asking them, well, how do you use water? How many employees do you have in that business? How many cases of soda are you making? I mean, it runs the gamut.
Wow. So that's a nice segue into the last question here, which is, obviously you're ingesting lots of data. You've got, quality control issues. You've got communication issues. You've got, communicating and sharing that data in a meaningful fashion to your customers that doesn't confuse them but helps them stay aligned to what your goals are. How is technology, playing a role as far as making that happen for you?
So one of the things we're going to explore is advanced metering infrastructure, which allows us to ping the meters every 6 minutes and capture real-time water use. It would be two-way communication. We currently have customer information portals where customers can get information about their budget, how they did relative to their budget. We are exploring, there's this new thing called social norming or community ranking. We believe that the water budget is a measure of your better self, but there's this movement afoot to actually compare like budgets. So you could have all the homes that have 3 people in them and roughly 5,000 square feet of landscaping competing to use the least amount of water. So it's something that we're launching on our portal now. I would imagine that we're going to, as water becomes scarcer and scarcer, we're going to refine the water budgets. We're going to see landscapes that have less turf and more climate-appropriate landscapes. Right now we provide a budget for turf. We're going to need a way to measure that. We're going to have to look at aerial imagery and LiDAR and be able to see and the difference between turf and ground cover and shrubs. We'll have to be able to parse that out. I see the future where this advanced metering infrastructure is communicating with the irrigation controller. That even in single family, there might be flow sensing capability to alert of leaks. I would love to see a dial or a device that were on the refrigerator, so people could know how much water they used in the last 24 hours. You can't understand it unless you know how much you're using. You can't be efficient unless you know what that is. So I see a change ahead where people are going to be interacting more with information and more with information directly derived from their water meter.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that what we've seen, and I'm sure all the folks in the smart irrigation category, when we have real-time flow sensing and we can find leaks and discover anomalies in the flow, it's the lowest hanging fruit as far as water conservation and water savings. And when it's real-time, you can respond to it quickly. And whether you notch from 5 to 3 to 2 days a week watering, if those days that you are watering, the system is leaking water all over the place, you're losing whatever savings you thought you were getting by reduced days. So I know for our customers, when we have real-time flow sensing on the outdoors, it really brings everybody into focus and makes everybody get on the same page quickly. So is that it on our questions, Meg?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, that was really some great answers there, Tim, and I appreciate your time. We'll go over a couple of audience questions real quick and see what we can do to answer them. So which ones are we looking at here? Okay, here's one for you, Tim. Is the outdoor budget based on water as if rain fell on the turf or on the water needed by typically 50% irrigation system? So how does precipitation factor into the landscape irrigation requirement?
So in the example I gave is, and what I'm going to talk about is Western. Every agency that has a budget-based rate structure does it differently. In Western's case, I think what this person's getting at is, do we allow for additional water because the irrigation system is only 50% efficient? The easy answer is no, we do not. Board policy is such that we do not believe that we should be rewarding inefficient practices. So, but we do provide water for 100% turf grass at this time. So if a landscape is 50% turf and 50% shrub, then there is enough extra water available in the shrub beds that can be spread over to the turf grass without exceeding your water budget.
Perfect. And very rarely do you have a landscape that's 100% turf, I would imagine.
Yeah, unless it's a park, and then the budgets are different for recreational turf areas. They actually get a higher water budget because of that. And that's
Perfect.
allowed in the state landscape model ordinance.
Here's another question. What to do when you see a stuck valve or broken sprinkler head? So you see a geyser on a property, and it's not your property, and you don't maintain it if you're a contractor. Is there a service number to call, or do you have to call the individual water agency? I mean, I guess they're talking about just basically community reporting of apparent leaks.
Well, every community does it differently. There are cities that have their own 311 hotlines. So if you see a leak in a park, you can call 311 and reach a customer service representative, explain what it is. But we're getting a little bit more savvy these days. There are agencies that have apps that are available for free download on your Android or iPhone. And we have one. It's part of our iEfficient campaign. And you can use your app, take a picture of a leak, and it's GPS located, and it automatically goes to the agency that is the water purveyor in that area. So it depends on the agency. We're all becoming a little bit more savvy. If you're not sure, I would contact your local agency to find out exactly how you should report a leak.
Excellent. I love the app idea. Well, we went a little bit over our time, but I think I could go another hour with questions. But I think
I could keep talking.
We'll cut off the questions for now. I guess I'd like to finish up with one last question at the risk of going over time. Do you think there's a silver lining in this crisis? I mean, obviously, it started off sort of ham-fisted, I would say. I mean, this broad-scale reduction in water use without consideration of the historical conservation achievements of each water district it's rewarding procrastinators and penalizing people who've been taking a proactive role. But if, let's assume that, good discussions will lead to good policies, is there a silver lining here? Should people be leaving the state? I mean, it's hard to understand how we should be reacting to this issue when you've got, the 24-hour news churn and people talking about the end of California and all sorts of strange pronouncements. I mean, what's your sort of gut perspective on both the level of crisis and if any good that could come out of this?
Well, I guess there's a saying, don't waste a good crisis, right?
Yeah.
I think that if we were smart about our water use collectively as a state, and if we were smart about our water use as individuals, we would be in a better position. Agencies are working towards that goal. I think that this crisis will lend itself to opportunity where we will see increased investment in technology to increase efficiency. We will see more agencies going to water budgets. We will see more landscapes with flow sense capability and drip irrigation and high-efficiency nozzles and smart irrigation technology that you can control from your phone or your iPad. I think we're going to get smart and we will adapt. I don't think this crisis is going to define us, but I think it will change us.
Well said. Well said. I think I'm just always amazed by just how much waste we've let occur on a systemic level. There's the smallest site we'll check out, and sometimes the payback is 3 months, 6 months. I mean, it's just because it's been the status quo for so long that people like boiling the frog in a pot of water. You start it off on a slow boil, and the frog doesn't realize what sort of situation it is until it's too late. I feel like that's the great metaphor for the water crisis, and it's time we sort of jump out of the pot.
Yeah, I agree. Don't be the frog stuck in the pot.
We'll make T-shirts for that. Well, Tim, thank you so much. You're a real champ, and I'll be excited to keep in touch with you. And maybe we'll have you back on the webinar later towards the end of the season or in the middle of the season when we see what happens as far as everybody's ability to get a little more thoughtful discussion into the Water Board's approach to the problem and where we've succeeded and where we failed.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity today, and I look forward to the future.
Thanks, Tim. So everybody else, sorry we went a little long there. you can visit hydropoint.com/drought-webinar for a full list of upcoming webinars in the series, or to even listen to past recordings, or feel free to contact us at info@hydropoint.com. Feel free to offer any criticisms or suggestions how we can make this better. The point of this webinar isn't for us, but for you. Upcoming topics will be how can the landscape industry respond to the drought, sustainability practices from a highly acclaimed real estate investment company, actually an amazing company that's been always at the forefront of conservation, and then looking at how a specific industry has responded to the drought from the healthcare industry. So a lot of people are jumping into the conservation initiative, and I think it's interesting to see how different industries are responding. And as usual, we'll try and focus on what works and what doesn't, and we look forward to talking to you guys again soon. So have a great Thursday, and thanks for joining, and don't waste water. Take care. Bye-bye.